What's up? You're here with the Fly Guy. I just wanted to thank you for tuning in. This is episode 1 of Fly Talk, and this series is just designed to go over fly patterns that I use in fish. I'm going to be going over how I construct those patterns, how they're fished, why I fish them certain ways in different bodies of water, and also different techniques and tactics that I use for different species of fish. Today I'm going to be going over a pattern. It's one of my favorites. I fish it a lot. It's called the Mighty Minnow. And I've already posted a fly tying demo for that pattern, and you can check that out on my blog. The recipe's up there, and that's at tfgflies.com. This pattern is primarily, I use it for largemouth bass and smallmouth bass, but I have caught northern pike on it, and it would do equally well for trout as well. So let's jump right in. Here's a picture of the pattern, and you can check that out right here. So this is a streamer pattern. This fly is designed to imitate, it has kind of a shad look to it. Bottom line, this fly just works. And the reason that I like it too is that it's very simple to tie. If I can spend a little less time at the vise and more time on the water, I view that as a success. One of my latest trips, I went out to Little Beaver Creek, and I was fly fishing for smallmouth, and I caught a really nice fish during the evening on this fly, and I'll cut to a clip now so you can check that out.
Alright folks, that right there is a product of the Mighty Minnow. That's a nice fish right there. Just a good smallmouth.
Typically when you're fishing this pattern, you can do a lot with it. Again, the reason that I love this pattern so much is, number one, yes, it's a little bit easier to tie. It's more of a simple pattern. But on top of that, there are so many different ways that you can fish it. And it can vary from how you vary your retrieve to the parts of the water column that you fish. You can fish it just under the surface and dart it quickly, like an injured minnow, on a floating line and a traditional 9-foot leader. Or you can drop down, you can throw a sink tip, and maybe just have it go maybe a foot under the surface and give it kind of a jigging action. You can also fish it on an intermediate sink line, which is what I choose to do most of the time. This enables me to fish a lot of different bodies of water and get down a couple feet, and I'm able to count down that sink rate for that fly. And it really is versatile with a clear intermediate sink. But on those days where you need to get deeper, you can also throw it on a full sink fly line. And a full sink fly line, again, you can count it down if you're fishing a lake where you're going to have deeper structure and you need to get and fish maybe some submerged rock piles. This fly can do it because when it is retrieved, it has neutral buoyancy. But if it's let sit, it will sink. It doesn't sink super fast, but again, you can count that down. And if you just know the sink rate of your fly line, you can get those depths pretty accurate and be able to target fish over that are suspended over structure. So it's very versatile. You can fish it a lot of different ways, and that's really the reason that I love it, because it covers almost every water column that I'm going to fish. Even though this fly is really simple to put together, there are some key design elements that really make this pattern work so well. And I'm going to zoom in close up on the fly, and let's go over those right now. Alright folks, here's a close-up of the Mighty Minnow. The hook that I chose to use for this fly is a wide gap style hook. It's a lighter wire. It's a Marissuego hook. And the nice thing about it is, I'll pull the material back a little bit so you can see. This size is a 1/0. It's not too big, but it's not small either. And you can see there's a pretty nice size hook gap there.
And then if you point the fly towards yourself here, I'll point it towards you so you can see. That hook point is slightly offset. So you do get a good hookup ratio with this fly. That's why I like it. And it doesn't sink too fast, and the hook weight doesn't, affect the pattern. One of the keys here is that you want to keep it as close to neutral buoyancy as possible, just because you get the most action out of the materials that we use for that. And you can incorporate pauses into your retrieve. The thread that I like to use, I'll actually go ahead and put that in view right now, is actually just a clear mono sewing thread. This is really inexpensive and it's very durable, and I'm able to load that up into a traditional fly tying bobbin. So it really works for me for all my streamers, and even some of my nymphs and poppers. So I would encourage you to give that a shot. So the tail is constructed of ice fur and polar flash. The ice fur and polar flash combined really just move like marabou. And the nice thing about polar flash is that I can get a lot more length out of it than I can marabou. And it just moves so nice in the water. And it actually has some flash components within itself. You can kind of see that it shines a little bit off the tail there. And the polar flash is just durable. Flashabou sometimes gets stretched out a little bit, especially when you start hooking into northern pike or toothy fish. And I just want that fly to last a little bit longer, so I chose polar flash for that. Now, what's nice about the polar flash is that when you do a strip pause retrieve on the pause, that material is still moving. And that typically is an enticing factor for fish who are following or chasing your streamer. In the middle of the fly, you'll see that there's craft fur. The craft fur there is nice because it gives the fly depth and body. So it's not going to look like just a thin minnow. It's actually going to have a flaring capability as the water moves that material. So as you pause, that material will breathe and flare out and will give the image of a larger bait fish. And then when I finish the head here, I've got a dubbing blend, the silver gray on top and the pearl white on bottom. And what that really does is that material moves and expands as well, but it produces a head that enables that fly to kick from side to side, depending on how aggressive your retrieve is. Subtle twitches will still get it to move from side to side, but if you do really hard strips, this fly will kick in multiple directions, and that erratic style retrieve will really trigger some pretty aggressive strikes from smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, and northern pike all together. They all like it. So that's why I choose to do the dubbing head the way that I do, and you can see how I construct that in the fly tying demo. But one of the big keys here is that all these materials work together, and I'll show you how they do that. I'm going to pull these apart so you can see. This is actually a gap. This isn't craft fur, that is clear thread. I typically have a small gap in between each set of materials. So there's that gap in between the ice fur, the craft fur, and the dubbing. What those gaps do is they allow water to pass through each set of materials. So that does a couple things. The water passes through the materials and can make them move independently of one another. So you get great action even though you've only got one hook and it's not articulated. The second part of it is that hook, because water is able to penetrate those materials more easily, that light wire hook is going to allow a certain amount of sink without giving up neutral buoyancy. So if you wanted to count this fly down on an intermediate sink, a full sink fly line, or a sink tip, you could do that because it is still going to sink. It's just not going to sink quickly. The beauty of the neutral buoyancy factor in this pattern is that when you are aggressively retrieving it and you pause it, that fly is going to kick to the side and that tail movement is going to start. And typically You need to be ready on that pause, because your smallmouth bass, your largemouth bass, and your northern pike, just to name 3, will absolutely crush it. Or when you start your strip the next time, if you've stopped it for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, it's just going to be stopped dead, and you're going to be setting the hook and you're connecting with a nice fish. So that is the reason that I leave those gaps in between, is to give my materials more action. It allows them to move independently of one another, and then also it does allow water to penetrate the materials and allows a certain amount of sink so that you can fish different depths with the fly. So the head of this fly also, as you can see, I've done a couple things with it, and you'll see this more in the fly tying demo. On the top here, I've got the eyes put on. I use just UV resin to kind of stick them on quickly, because super glue can get a little messy. So in between the eyes, after I've set them, I've put 2 coats of fabric paint on the top and bottom. So on the top, I have a solid silver fabric paint for the base coat, and then topped with a silver glitter fabric paint. On the bottom, the base coat is a solid red fabric paint, and then it is coated. It's kind of difficult to see, but you can see the sparkles there. It is coated with a clear pearl glitter fabric paint. So this does a couple things. The fabric paint is super durable, and I love it. It is way more durable than you would think. I mean, it's designed to be able to handle the washing machine and to get wet, so it's already made for the environments that we're going to be fishing in, and it can kind of stand up to some abuse, so it's durable. It also acts as a glue. Once you put it in between the gaps in your eyes, those eyes are not going to go anywhere. The fabric paint is really strong and adheres to things very well, especially fly tying materials that we would use. And I really like it because it shapes the head, and it holds those eyes in at the end. There is some drying time involved. That's the only drawback to fabric paint, is that you need to let it sit after your last coat for maybe a few days for it to fully cure. But it is well worth the wait, because your flies will be durable and you will not lose that color. I do coat the head with Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. This is just a really good alternative to UV resin. I don't mind using UV resin to coat the heads of my flies, but even if you use a thin material, sometimes what I run into is when a toothy fish like a pike, or even repeated abuse from casting and catching bass, they will scratch up the finish that coats the eyes. So I use this layer of Sally Hansen's over top the eyes in the fabric paint, and it's very durable, but once it gets scratched up, UV resin can make it get really thick if you try to top coat it again. The nice thing about Sally Hansen's is that I can easily go back and run a thin layer of that over top of the damaged sections of the eyes and the head, and it will fill in the cracks and scratches, and it's like new. And I don't add a bunch of bulk to my fly pattern. So, with very minimal effort, and you basically have to let it dry for maybe, 20 minutes to a half hour, it's ready to go. So that's why I choose to use Sally Hansen's, just because it's thin and it penetrates those cracks in the finish easily. So repairs are simple, and typically that's the biggest damage point that happens to the fly, because fish, the predatory fish, will be eating this fly head first, so your eyes and your top coats will get scratched up a little bit. But no big deal, still catches fish. So the head of this fly, combined with the fabric paint, the Sally Hansen's, and the silver eyes, that is going to add a little bit of flash to your pattern. It's also going to shape the head, but it's also going to add some weight. And it's not a lot of weight, but it's just enough to tip the nose of that fly down when you pause your retrieve. And that signals to predatory fish that is an easy meal, and that fish might be injured. And that can really solicit some ferocious strikes. So I hope this helped you, and I hope this outlines kind of why I designed this fly the way that I do, and I hope it can help you construct some of your patterns moving on down the line.
So this fly pattern, it's just a producer. I know that if you tie this pattern and you fish it in your home waters, if you're fishing it for largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, northern pike, anything that eats bait fish, you will have success. It's got great action. You can fish it a lot of different ways. And again, if you want to get the tying recipe and follow along with that tying demo, you can find that on my blog at tfgflies.com. If you like this video, go ahead and hit thumbs up. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And in the comment section below, if you want to comment, let me know what your favorite bass streamer is. This is primarily a bass streamer that I use, but you know, there's all kinds of streamers out there. So comment below and let me know what your favorite streamer is. And thanks again for watching. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.